Round one of the MLR is a wrap, and the fantasy results are in. How did the players do? But more importantly, how did our fantasy managers do in MLR's very first Fantasy Rugby League? The Fantasy Ruckers show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, episode number 4 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much for tuning in, to all of the Fantasy Ruckers community members, to all of the Fantasy Rugby community members, and everyone else tuning in. Thank you so much for hopping on this episode. Of course, with me are my co-hosts, Matthew Yee, Devin Vanderpool. Guys, week 1 is a wrap. Initial reactions to how that all went down.
Booyah, baby!
Man, I don't even want to talk about it. I can't believe the first week I'm ending up facing Vandy. And I don't even have a kicker. And I lose to this guy over here who's watching his first ever MLR game.
Whatever.
First
Your
ever
brother
full
even tried to
rugby
get me to
game.
bench
I'm
my
losing
kicker,
to
and I
him.
still won.
Whatever. I don't want to talk about it. Let's move on. Let's get to week 2. Let's go.
Well, hey, now, okay, hold on there, Matt. We do need to talk about week 1. I know it's going to be tough, but hey, Vandy's going to enjoy it. I'm sure he's going to enjoy this episode. But yes, week 1 is a wrap. Fantasy results are in, like you heard at the top of the show. So we're going to break all of that down. It was an exciting week with a lot of rugby action in, which means a lot of fantasy rugby action as well. So before we hop into it, make sure you follow us on all of our social media channels at the Fantasy Ruckers. That's how you're going to stay on top of our league, stay up to date with everything going on. That's where you'll find all the latest news and notes when it comes to fantasy rugby in the MLR. So yeah, like I said in the show, week 1 recap, we're going to give you the fantasy results. We're also going to talk about a little bit of waiver wire. I know our league members are going to be interested in that because there are definitely a few teams with a few open roster spots that need to fill some gaps. There's a little bit of gray area there. So we're definitely going to break that down as well. So jam-packed show for all you guys listening out there. So let's hop right into it. But before we get into the week 1 results and the stats, let's go over some news and notes of the latest stuff that's going around the league. And guys, we finally have stats for the MLR. The MLR is finally releasing stats. And I don't know if we say whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing, because it's a good thing in a sense that we have stats and it's going to make my life easier tracking all this. But they obviously couldn't have picked a worse time because they decided to announce this like 3 days before the start of the season when I have already done everything by hand. So I'm just like, what the heck, guys? This is ridiculous. You made me waste my time.
They knew exactly
so.
what you were doing.
They heard about us.
They said Ryan's got to put in the hard work before he deserves any stats from us.
There you go.
I guess I had to earn my stripes a little bit. But I saw that. I was pretty excited. Now, I did peek at them as I was going through the week 1 results, and there is a little bit of smoothing of the edges, to say the least, that can happen with the kind of the framework and how it all operates on the MLR website. But hey, It's a start. A week ago, we didn't have stats at all. Now we have at least a little bit of something. So It's definitely a step in the right direction. And a little bit of some milestones here for some big MLR teams here. Gilgronis, they become the 7th team in MLR history to reach 1,000 points. And the Seattle Seawolves, one of the original franchises of this MLR team, of this MLR league, they are the first team to reach 50 games played. I don't know, pretty cool to see some of these teams starting to build, I guess, a historic, database of players and achievements and stuff like that. It's just how you develop a franchise in a brand new league. It's kind of cool to see.
Congratulations, Mr. Gilchrist. Way to go, Mr. Gilchrist. You did it. You made it to 1,000.
Made it to 1,000.
And they just sit behind San Diego Legion, Seattle Seawolves, the Utah Warriors, the NOLA Gold, the Toronto Arrows, and Rugby New York. So they're right behind those 6 teams.
You're almost at first.
Almost about they're about 300 and a bit points away from that, but they're definitely getting there. So we'll see whether or not they can close that gap. And then something that I think, Matt, that you had something to pick with in terms of the owner of the Gilgronis. We'll have a look at this.
Mr. Gilchrist, we're starting to see a little trend here, man. We're starting to see a trend of uncreativeness. You're naming teams after yourself, after your own drinks. You know, Gilchrist, Gilgronis, Giltinis, and now you're just taking the Jackals mascots when Gilgroni has nothing to do with the Jackal. Come on, for those Gilchrist, we need
And for those of you listening out there, on our YouTube page, we do have the picture up on the screen for you. But yes, it makes sense for the Dallas Jackals. They have the Jackal mascot. But what the heck is the Austin Gilgronis doing with, like, it's literally exactly the same thing outside of maybe the color of the eyes.
Oh my gosh.
And the skin of your face. But like, dude, what? You're not even a it's not a Gilgroni. I don't know.
I'll give it
stole their homework.
Yeah, I'll give it to Austin. This wasn't the Battle of Texas. This is the Battle of Mascots. And Austin took it. The Gilgronis took it, so they got to keep the mascot. The Jackals got to go with the Gilgroni drink now.
And I will say, I didn't realize that it was the Battle of Texas. It didn't even occur to me that we have 3 teams in the league now that are from Texas. So we're going to have a nice little rivalry going on between there. So that will be interesting. But yeah, kind of weird there. Maybe that adds to the rivalry that they're stealing mascots. Maybe the team that finishes higher this season gets the rights to using that. But I don't know. I feel like the Dallas Jackals have that right because they are called
the final game.
Jackals.
The mascot should have to fight in the middle.
Yeah,
right.
And Gilchrist is repping.
Yep.
And we'll see whether or not who comes up on top there. And then last thing here, pretty cool here, just as a note, kind of as we know that MLR is kind of that bridge gap between these professional leagues, and it's cool to see some of these players who begin in the MLR or at least make a stopgap in the MLR move on to bigger and professional leagues. And Baska, he was a scrum half for the Utah Warriors, your Utah Warriors, Vandy, for a pretty hefty time here for the start of their franchise, and he moves on to Rouen Normandy in the Pro D2 side. So it's cool to see kind of players moving on to bigger and better things across the MLR.
We could have used them on Sunday.
Oh, do you know what? He was good too last year. He was good. He had a good boot on him. Good for him though. I mean, that's what this league's for.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last thing here, if you haven't checked it out, the MLR has released the first 15 of week 1. Some pretty notable names there. So you'll see guys like Robbie Coetzee, who did good in week 1. Ben Mitchell did well. We're looking at Bowden Waka, Julian Dominguez. Matt, you're going to talk about him. Some pretty key names there. Not always a direct translation between, actual rugby play and fantasy rugby play, which we'll talk a lot about throughout this episode. So necessarily if they make the first 15 here on this list, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're necessarily fantasy relevant, but it is something to note moving forward. Yep. So with that being said, that's the news and notes, and we are going to get to the round 1. But before we do that, we didn't have an episode released since our live draft show. So I just wanted to get an initial reaction kind of from Matt and Vandy. Guys, you had some time to kind of stew over your team. You had 1 week to see them, and we went through the process, and there were some challenges throughout the whole thing. And if you haven't watched it, you can check it out on our YouTube page. We live streamed the first 4 rounds, I believe.
Yeah,
so you can go out there. Yeah, so you can go on there and check that all out. But guys, when you went through that process, what was that like? I know it was kind of something brand new for all of us in our league.
Man, I'd be interested to see what Vandy thought. But I mean, from me, who knows some of the players, I still found myself having a hard time choosing guys that weren't, on the list that were playing last year. And I mean, some of those guys, for example, like McEnany, some of those guys, they showed up and they're top. They should be on the list and top, 100 guys that are scoring points.
I would say the hardest thing for me about the draft was, I guess, really a lack of knowledge. I guess that's a cop-out answer, but you went in, I went in with some sort of strategy. I was going to take this position, and go from there. And it was just like, okay, I'll go this guy. Nope. This guy. Nope. This guy. Nope. And, it eventually just becomes you're throwing a dart at the wall.
Yep.
But it was the later rounds. I didn't really take it too too critical, I guess. I didn't let it waver me any, but I mean, that was kind of a learning curve. Not only, barely knowing the positions and everything, and then it just felt like every single guy I thought I, looked up and did a little bit of data on, and he was just gone to a different league, no info on him. Now he's a player's coach, and now he's doing this. And
hey, you got to be feeling pretty good now that you got the dub, even though you didn't even know who you were picking. And I knew who I was picking, and maybe that's the key.
You know
maybe
what? I
that's
only
the key.
made one
you gotta
mistake
just throw
this draft.
darts at the wall.
At the end of the day, I made one mistake, and I didn't draft our boy Co.
Hey.
And I got a cop out of an answer again when I could say I had him slotted next, and I did. But
I stayed away. I was going to get him suspended if I drafted him. I was ready to risk it all.
Vandy, you messaged me after that, and you're like, man, I should have taken him. And that happens in all fantasy drafts where it's always one pick too late. But no, I think out of all of this, what I really realized is having played, obviously, Vandy, fantasy football and all the other fantasy sports, how I guess privileged we are to have those fantasy platforms that do all that grunt work for you. You know what I mean? Like when you're doing the draft and you have the draft rooms, like you have the average draft pick, you have the rankings, you can quickly sort guys, you can quickly find guys. Hey, I need this position. Okay, let's sort that out. By us doing it the way we did it and just not having the resources there and literally doing it bare bones, like throwing it back to the 90s and doing it by hand, it was all on the manager or the team to do that research to find those guys. And yes, we provided rankings, and yes, we provided like sheets that we could sort things and stuff like that. But still, you had to go through a lot. I mean, there were almost 500 players to go through. And it's not like football where we know who's starting on a week in and week out basis, especially with the league that has a lot of turnover, which we found out very, very quickly when we were looking at the league. I mean, like we were like, oh yeah, okay, this player, I'll draft this guy. Vandy, it happened to you like 10 times. We're like, oh, I'll draft this guy. Oh yeah, sorry, he moved on to this league. Oh no, he doesn't play anymore. He got released.
I would Google his name and it would come up, but it would say playing for, but now he's like a player's coach or something.
Yeah, I mean, I would say
the hardest part for me was Ryan. You did a great job of providing whatever info you could and numbers and everything of last year, but it was like any new acquisitions. Like I could Google new MLR acquisitions and it didn't mean anything to me. I don't know what this guy from the All Blacks means. Like I know New Zealand All Blacks is dope, but I don't know who he's going to be taking out and what he's going to be doing there.
Yeah.
And that kind of was like, I take this guy and they're like, oh, Vandy, he's like a 36-year-old, maybe he'll be losing some time here. I'm like, well,
yeah. I mean, it's tough. There were a lot of factors to kind of to consider when you were making these picks, and it was tough. I mean, we extended the draft time. It was 3 minutes. It gave people some time, and we also did slow draft, but still, it made it difficult. So,
but it's still really enjoyable. Still, it was draft.
It was really cool to finally see a fantasy rugby draft operate in that way. I don't know. 100%. It's always been like creating lineups and things like that, but to finally have something that, it was through, our Discord channel and everything. And it was pretty prehistoric and simple, but hey, it gave us something which was a lot of fun. Just as we move on here to the week 1 matchups, as we wrap up this draft conversations and how those teams you did draft ended up factoring in on that week 1 performance. Hokie in our league, his team name is called, I believe, let me pull it up here. I got all of them to send me the team names. The Dankest Anchors. That's his team name. And Hokie, he's on there. And he actually, after the draft, he sent me some pretty cool stats. So if you guys had to guess a team that had the most drafted players from our league, who would you have guessed out of all of them?
I would have guessed them, but I'm going to go with the Legion.
The Legion,
yeah, because they're all taken by you.
Boom!
Fair enough. San Diego's a little bit further down there, but Matt, you're right. It is the Guiltinis, and it is interesting how they did over the weekend, which we'll talk about. How a lot of fantasy managers in our league are not happy with how many Guiltini players did not do well.
Or didn't even play.
Yeah. Some of them, didn't even play. And by position, just for kind of reference in terms of depth, a lot of back three players, which makes sense. 32 that led. I mean, you're filling three positions in there, so it only makes sense that there's more. Back row, 23, same thing. And surprisingly, I mean, fly halves, 16 of them were drafted in our league. That's double. So that means they're, even despite that rule change at the beginning when I talked about the depth of the position and splitting it up, guys seem to be finding a way to find that depth there. So it'll be interesting to see. So you can check all of those, the full results of the draft on our Discord channel. Like we said, you can also watch the draft again. We live streamed it on our YouTube channel at the Fantasy Ruckers. And then the link for our Discord channel to see the entire draft results is on our Discord channel. The link is on our socials, which you can find there. Also a post on Reddit. The MLR community on Reddit has been fantastic with us, and we've been able to post the draft results there as well. Got a lot of traction, and people were interested in where players went. So pretty interesting stuff. So like I said, you guys took the draft and then you moved on to week one to use those players. Some of them, didn't even play that were picked high. It was pretty crazy. Before we hop into kind of match by match here, guys, what was your initial reaction? I'm really excited to hear what Vandy has to say, because it's his first kind of week really diving into rugby. I know you've seen some replays of games. I know you watched last year's final and everything, but to actually in actual live time enjoy the MLR, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. But Matt, why don't you begin us off here, having watched a lot of rugby in your past, kind of how does this stand up to all of that stuff that you've seen so far?
Man, I first want to just bring up the fact that I forgot that that MLR is doing their whole 20-minute water break thing. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, you're playing rugby, you play 40 minutes, you get a half, and then you play another 40 minutes. You shouldn't have those 1-minute breaks in between. I forgot about that. I don't understand why. It slows the game down. But other than that, I thought that it was, fantasy rugby has, maybe I don't fully love the style of play or the way that it's being broadcasted, but it makes me look at guys and see like I'm watching football, like, oh, I hope he gets the ball. Oh, he gets the ball in his hand, and I'm saying, oh, break the tackle. Like, come on, get like finding, for example, Momsen. I mean, that whole Rugby Atlanta game, I'm trying to find and see when he's going to get the ball, if he's going to get the ball. And I'm kind of looking at other guys and saying, oh, that he's getting the ball a lot. Dougie Fraser seems to be getting the ball a lot on DC. Maybe that's a guy to look at, or maybe that was a great pick by whoever. I forget who drafted him, but it definitely, first week of watching it with being involved in rugby fantasy, it definitely made me look at it in a new light. That's for sure.
And I guess that the question that everyone's waiting for, Vandy. I mean, you've watched football through a fantasy lens, you've watched hockey through a fantasy lens, and you now can add rugby to that list. Man, what did it feel like to finally kind of put it into action, and what was your initial reaction to watching that?
Well, first of all, just let me in victory.
Oh, here we go. The
on.
chirps have begun.
Come on.
But winning aside, I just, like I said, it's a culture that I bring. But anyways, no, it was really cool. Like Matt touched on it perfectly. It's like watching fantasy again. You're hoping for your guys. I didn't. I watched the entire Utah game, and the camera angle was pretty tough. But other than that, like honestly, it's like watching anything else. And I understood a lot more of the game than I thought I was gonna. The penalties, I'm still not there yet, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that'll come with time.
It's like anything that some of them are funny, but no, man, it was a lot of fun, and I would say the tough thing now would be waiver, because there's just so much going on the field, and it was hard to, like in football, let's say like a wide receiver pot, like it's very evident he's doing a lot. It's very evident, and that was tough in rugby, but I mean, it's fantasy, man. Like exactly what Matt said. You're just pumped to see your guys get in there. I was getting ripped apart about my Legion picks. So to see, Joe and Bjorn get the first 2 tries of the game, it was just sweet music after that. Even though it was against the boys, and the boys played like garbage. But
I was thinking while we were watching, what did you think of the commentating in the game you watched, or what did you think of the broadcast? I mean, outside of the camera, I've got a whole other spiel about that. But What did you think of the commentating? Did you find it helpful? Because I find they tailor it towards new watchers and new
I
fans.
did notice that. And a lot of it was it'd be similar if you get into MMA right now. MMA, they have like now when they're doing the ground game and wrestling, they describe a lot more so it doesn't just look awkward. So I thought they actually did a good job of that, just try and describe why it went into a scrum or I thought it was helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I have something to say about that because games were different game by game. Some games looked really, really good. Like the broadcasting quality was great.
Yeah.
The camera angle that they had was good. The commentating was good. And then you had other games that just didn't meet that same standard, and you had poor angles. I mean, at one point, which we'll get into when we get in the game, I mean, your boys, you were watching that game, Vandy, the Utah Warriors. They basically cut out, I guess, 20 minutes, and it made my life a little bit more difficult because I just don't have the stats available to me then to stat those out. So obviously there's still kinks with that to work out. Now that I mean, with any league that happens at the start, it takes a lot of resources to put a really, really good TV product on the screen. And you can't compare it to the NFL. You can't compare it to any of the top four pro sports in North America because the resources that they have expendable to them are just a mile bigger. But I thought it was decent. But yeah, there are areas that the commentating could get a little bit better. But I think from a fantasy perspective, firstly, I couldn't agree with you guys more. You consume the game differently now.
Yep.
You don't look at it as necessarily a team game. It is still a team game, but you are looking for that number. You're looking for, I have 13 on Utah. I have 15 on San Diego. I have Joe Peterson. I see him lining up for that kick.
Sir.
I see him scoring that try. Yep. And you're just looking for that a little bit more, which I think is really, really cool and adds a whole nother element. Yep. From a strategy standpoint, as we start heading into the matchups, what I've learned is the scoring values in our league you cannot expect the same as other fantasy sports.
Yeah.
The scoring is going to be low. There is not going to be a lot of points that are spread across many players, which leads me to my next point. A lot of players are going to have duds.
Yep.
There are going to be a lot of players that have duds. And when you can get a guy that can score 1 point because he stayed on the field for 80 minutes, if you can get a guy that gets 2 points because he got a try assist, it's a low number compared to other fantasy sports, but those 2 points are going to make a huge, huge difference going forward in this league. So I think you need to shift your mindset with that going forward. It's not going to be like fantasy football where it's 100 plus points that you're seeing on a week.
Yep.
Our highest point total this week, which we'll get into, was I think no one topped 40 points. I think it was just high 40s. I think it was like 39, which was Hokie who got that. So it's going to be a different mindset that you have to go into these matchups, which then leads me to my last point. It's all about tries. Yes, kicking is big, but that has been nerfed because we had cut down the points in half, which is great because you'll see in the rankings that we mentioned here, the kickers are spread out amongst the top 25, top 50, let's say, which is something that we wanted. We didn't want kickers just to dominate the top of the list. Now, with that being said, that just means that guys who score tries, and if you have guys in your team that score tries, you are going to win a lot of matchups. And I think that's what's going to be the biggest factor going in is who is carrying that ball and who is passing that try line to put 5 points up on the board. I think that's going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, I find that when I'm watching, I realize, I got to look for who's carrying the ball. Who's finding their way to be a ball carrier in majority of the moments, and who's getting the ball in the goal line, and who's the guy that is breaking the game line that the team is kind of trusting and that they're giving the ball a lot to and designing their plays and set piece plays around, because those are the guys you got to look for, or else they're not going to be scoring.
I think rugby'd be tough to kind of pick an individual. I remember somebody sent me a video, and it was kind of the two differences of a team. You can have high flying wingers or strong up front row. And that's kind of what I was kind of looking at. I'm like, hey, what kind of diversity are we getting here? Like, what kind of teams are really favoring one or the other? And I didn't really see one team that was like okay, we're going to beat and bash and brutalize. Like they all kind of did the same rhythm. So as far as that goes, I think that's going to be tough, is finding which teams are consistent at making an effort to do, I guess, one or the other.
I mean, to be fair too, that identity is going to come as the season goes on. I mean, I'm not too sure how Rugby Atlanta was at the start of the season, but towards the end of last season, man, they were so reliant on that set piece, and they were using a lot through that. So that identity, and I think the strengths. This is just week 1, right? This is people are still feeling the waters. They're still figuring out lineups. They're still figuring out who they're going to put on a weekly basis in their 23-man roster. So it should be interesting how they kind of work out.
Speaking of lineups, though, Utah, you did a great job. We were killing it on that. Penalties, there we go. Not so much.
And on that note, Vandy, how are you feeling about your team now that you're cheering for the Utah Warriors after seeing one match played by them, after having the people vote for you to force you to like this team? Are you happy with the decision that they made for you?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, the game was cool. It just felt like every time we scored, we played poor defense up until they scored, but the back and forth of sports, we were in it right to the end. We brought it within, I think, 3 points at the end there. So, yeah, I mean, the only thing is I heard a lot about this Mike Teo. They're bumping him up to, and he looked good, and he looked like a guy who played for New Zealand or something. He looks like a killer. Like the guy looked like
he's a big boy
player, like the cover player, but I expected more. And that's just, hey.
I mean, to be fair, he was on, I think, pace to score a huge try, and then he passed it off. I think. That was Mike Teo. Mike Teo, he passed it off to, I think, Caleb McKean in that match. Mike Teo bursted through the line.
I thought that was Moananu.
No. That was Mike Teo, and no, because Maya Nanu's on San Diego.
Yeah. I thought it was San Diego. I remember the play.
No, Mike Teo bursted through, and this is what I think we're going to get in fantasy rugby. There's going to be so many moments through this whole season.
Mike Teo wasn't making that try. He was not making that try.
I don't know, man. That guy is for his size. That guy is fast, man. That's why he got picked number 1 overall in our league, because that guy can move. But all I'm saying is that I think there are going to be a lot of moments through this entire season where there are going to be things like that. Wide open try, wide open. And the guy goes, you know what? I'm going to dish it off to my buddy here at the 5 meter line for him to take it.
Hey, that's still 2 points. That's still 2 points there.
It's still 2 points, but think about, let's say a guy bursted for a try and he bursted through the line from the 50 meter line. That's 10 points going down to 2. 8 points can win you a week.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So
that's true. Let's just get into that game since we're already on it, already talking about it.
Yeah, sure. Why not? So,
because I've got a bone to pick with that game. Oh my goodness! I don't know which camera it is that we're on. Are we on this one? Put me in single
shot. All right, you're in sync now. We got you.
I don't understand how you can broadcast a game that 1 plays for 60 minutes out of the 80, and 2 looks like it was filmed on a potato. All right. You can't do that. The MLR is trying to grow as a game. Cut it out. You got to put a product out there. Quit putting something with 3 pixels on there. It looks like I couldn't even tell which team was who. I couldn't tell what players were what. And I mean, they couldn't even get the sideline broadcast. You could have filmed that on an iPhone.
The camera was tough,
but the sideline broadcast looks like it's filmed on an iPhone 3GS. It's ridiculous. If you want to grow the game, I understand why Rugby Network is free now, because if they're just pulling feed from the team, I don't know who was giving that feed, but that was just ridiculous.
All right. Hopefully they can figure out. I guess so. All I'll say, I won't get into that. We talked about how broadcasting stuff needs to improve. Yeah. But I will say, on a positive note, the Rugby Network has been absolutely clutch for us in terms of getting access to these games. So
Hey, we know why it's free now, though. We know why it's free.
All right, moving on. So here we go. The Utah and San Diego Legion game. Pretty interesting match. You guys obviously digested this a lot, Vandy, since it's your new favorite team. Some notable players from this match: Cliven Laubser. I think he was one of the best pickups of the week. I believe John of the Lads on Tour team made that pickup during, I think, leading up to the matchup, and he ended up getting 11.5 points at the fly half position. I think he needed a kicker, so he got that in, so he did well. Caleb McKean, we talked about it with that 50-meter try. He came through for that. Yeah, and some pretty interesting other, but Ben Mitchell up there as well. Joe Peterson, Vandy, he was kicking in them as well. Guys, thoughts on Utah, San Diego?
try.
Yeah, my big one out of that one was Ben Mitchell. I mean, the guy looked like every other breakdown he was getting the ball again.
Yeah.
And he was breaking the line, and it looked like, and that's what I'm telling you. I mean, guys who get opportunity are the guys that are going to get the opportunity to score. They get the ball, they have a higher opportunity to score, and those are the guys that you want to look at. And I don't want to give too much away, but he is available, and that's somebody that
When do waivers
I would want to be put him down.
We'll get into it, but they're going to process every Wednesday night, so they'll go through Thursday morning. But yeah, there'll be a lot of waiver guys that we'll be talking about on this show in just a moment's time, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But Vandy, anything to add about seeing your boys outside of Mike Teo beasting it out there on that and not getting you a try there, but instead giving it to Caleb McKean?
I don't have Mike Teo, but no, it was really fun to kind of watch the first game, get it going, and I pretty much added everything I needed.
All right, let's move on to Rugby Atlanta versus Old Glory DC. This was the opener of the season. Pretty cool match. As I pull up the points here, I'm not too sure if you guys watched any of this, but that Ryan Nell hike pass, did you see it? That led to the try by Austin White. That almost, I was thinking that. I was like watching it, and I'm like, man, that deserved a try assist on its own. He didn't get it because he was the guy that passed it to the guy who got the try assist, but just for dishing that out, I thought that deserved a little bit of note.
I'm gonna be honest, a little overrated by the commentators. It's not like he had that much pressure on him, and really Austin White, the winger, did all the work, and I mean, another guy to look at. But it looks like Rugby Atlanta has got a whole new game style this year. A team that was relying on the set piece looks like they're going to be a team that's going to keep the ball in play and keep it live and move quick, and I'm good with that. That works for me.
Yeah, they were moving it well. Lots of offloads, keeping the pace of play up. I mean, when you play that type of style, yes, maybe the Rugby Atlanta set piece bonus point won't be as strong, but you're just gonna have more opportunity for a wide variety of players to score of all the positions, really, when you play that type of style of rugby. So I think that's very exciting. The biggest player that we have to mention out of the whole week, and the guy who finished number one, who was on no one's radar heading into this week, Joaquin de la Vega Mendia, scoring 17.3 points on the week. Like I said, finishing number one in that top spot. He has fly half and back three eligibility. I believe he played fullback in that match. Most of it coming off of the boot. I will say that. He was kicking. But I guess that just goes to show you how much of an effect a kicker can have on a matchup. I mean, he made 6 conversions, 2 penalties. Just imagine if we had the points still up at 3 and 2. Dude, that guy would have he would have won a matchup on his own on this week.
You know, if Rugby Atlanta doesn't score 6 tries, I mean, you got 6 conversions, doesn't score 6 tries, that's easily, I mean, is the plan to just get kickers from teams that are in good matchups? Like, is that the play? Because,
but I mean, that's the strategy with football when it comes to kickers. Get a guy that's on a high-powered offense, and he gets a lot of points. And I mean, that can range. And I don't know if Rugby Atlanta is a team that will be scoring. The game style is going to lend itself to that if they're going to be scoring 6 tries every weekend. But when you have game matches like that, you're going to get kickers that have this. I mean, they still have to make the conversion. It's not easy. But yeah, maybe that's a point to be had, Matt. That
hey, this year a Jets quarterback put up 400 yards. Anything can happen.
Hey, that's true. Right. Hey, he did look good on the boot. I would say that while watching that game, there was nothing that he did that was that made it look like that he was a standout player in terms of like a player on the field and rugby wise, but fantasy wise, I mean, he clearly killed it, and that's definitely a guy to look out for, and somebody who's going to be a sharpshooter on penalties and conversions for sure.
Yeah. Mike Dabulas
Yep.
also finishing up there with 12 points.
I liked him
finishing
too. He looked
fourth
good.
on the week. Back three player. He's owned by Victorious Secret. I believe that is Malcolm who has that team. Austin White, we talked about. And this name, I'm going to absolutely butcher it, but this is something that I've been thinking through as we've been going on to, Vandy, is that I don't know how we're going to get through the season
Waka?
pronouncing these names, but
Mm.
it's going to be crazy. No, this is Tarangatira Waito Kia. He scored 8.2 points, back three for Rugby Atlanta. He was up there finishing 14th. But yeah, there's just a bunch of names on here. I think the MLR has one of the coolest names in all of professional sports because there's just so many players from so many different places. But yeah, Tia Rangatira Waito Kia. I hope I did that okay. 8.2 points on the week, top 14 finish on the back three. And Duncan Van Shalwick, I'll finish with him. Scrum half, fly half position, 17th on the week. And we will be releasing all of these full rankings on our Discord channel. So head there to get a detailed look at all of that. But that's where we're getting these numbers through. Let's move on to that highly coveted Austin Gilgronis Dallas Jackals matchup, the battle of the same mascots.
Yep.
What did you guys think of that matchup? It was cool to see, I guess, Dallas play their first ever match in the MLR. It was cool to see another team kind of join the league.
It sucks that I had to start that way, but
Yeah, I was gonna say
it is what it is.
I
I
run
guess
it back.
that's what happens when you don't have your head coach there. But I mean, I was watching that game. I think West picked up Julian Dominguez. That guy is a beast. It looks like the Gilgronis look for him. It looks like he loves getting the ball and he loves running over people, and that's for sure. His try,
mix.
he just bumped the guy, just boom fa and just gone, and just in for a try. So he looks good, and Wes is a lucky owner over there.
Yeah, I mean, he paid a high price. He picked him in the second round, so hopefully he's paying dividends for that. In this matchup, Robbie Coetzee, the hooker, he's going big time on there. I believe he scored 2 tries in that match, 11.1 points on the week, finishing 7th out of all positions. And if you can have a front row player that's finishing in the top 10 on a week, you're going to have a huge advantage. Because
could have been one of those game script things, though. You know, sometimes
it could have been, and
you figure that's a game script.
For sure. I mean, when you look at if teams are doing a lot of set piece plays and you see them mauling it over and stuff, that you're going to see forwards start getting those points. But the big thing is who are the forwards that are going to have those opportunities most?
True.
Kind of same with the kicker hole aspect is who's going to be within the 10-meter line that are going to have those opportunities to maul over the try line. We'll see. Clearly, Robbie Coetzee was able to do that. Kyle Bradenbeck, back row, second row guy. He did pretty well, 9.1 points, just finishing outside the top 10. Outside that, I mean, I guess a high one was the Gilgronis. I believe they finished as the best set piece bonus point this week with 5 points.
Yeah.
I believe that came along with 2 try assists. So they lead all set pieces bonus points with try assists. So if they plan on running it back a lot with their forwards on those set piece plays, maybe you'll see more guys like Robbie Coetzee on a week basis.
I mean, my thought might be maybe the Dallas Jackals are if you're trying to look for a guy to pick up last minute on game day on Saturday, maybe the team facing Dallas Jackals, whoever's on the team facing the Dallas Jackals, maybe that's a good bet because it looks like, I mean, it's only been one game, but it looks like teams might be putting numbers up on them.
Yeah, so that will be interesting. And like I said, still very early in the season, still trying to figure out lineups and players that are playing.
Yep.
So what we see right now is definitely not indicative of what is going to happen 1, 2, 3 weeks from now. So we'll see how that goes. Let's move on to the Houston SaberCats LA Giltinis match. I think this is the one that we want to spend the most amount of time on just because of how, man. Did anyone expect this?
I didn't.
Not when LA was up 8-0.
I mean, that's the whole reason why I picked up Jordan Trainer on game day. I'm expecting Jordan Trainer playing 15 for Giltinis. He's going to have a bit of a show, a bit of a day. But you know what? I'm not going to give credit to Houston. I'm going to give everything to Giltinis doing everything they possibly could to lose that game because they got every card that they possibly could. They did not want to hold on to the ball. They dropped every
Yeah.
ball that they could, and they just
Some
said,
bad
Houston, you're having it.
turnovers.
Yeah, they gave it to Houston. And I mean, good on Houston, but
And you know what it was? It was the deep turnovers too. It seems
Yeah.
like those are just such a killer. Like, because then you can get the quick boot out, you reset the field, and it's such a killer.
I mean, Giltinis
well,
are playing in their half the entire game.
Yeah. And it was smart.
Yeah,
It was smart by Houston. They just kept pinning them and
Yep.
playing smart. And I mean, you can't fault the team for that.
Yep.
I mean, I going into this, I don't think in any league should the reigning champions lose to the team that finished dead last in the league last year by a landslide. They're definitely not happy with that performance.
No, it's
and
tough.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hey, but
you
they'll
look
bounce back.
To be
and a
fair-
lot of yeah.
To be fair, Houston had the most movement in the offseason. I'm not 100% on that, but I'm pretty sure they had the most movement in the offseason as far as players.
Hey, so a new identity, new players that could go a long way as well. But it's crazy to me how many of you guys, how many of the 8 of you drafted Giltini's players and just none of them pulling, not none of them, but most of them just not pulling through. I mean,
How many
out of
Giltinis do I got?
we said
Even worse, 3 or 4 of
we
them got yellow cards.
yeah, so -4, and that's my next point about this, and we did learn something from every single match, and I think that's the thing that we learned in this match is that yellow cards are killer.
Yep.
Oh,
Minus
negative 4 points.
-4 points. I mean, a guy scores a try and then gets a yellow card. I mean, I believe a player this week got that. Got a yellow card. I forget who it was. Scored a try, got a yellow card, and it ends up just being an average performance because he got binned.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about this. I mean, does that mean that for future reference, do you stay away from teams that have bad discipline as a team? Because, Vandy, I don't know if you know this, but you get 1 offside, 2 offside, 3 offside penalties in a row. The ref is saying, hey, like 1 more, so next guy is going in the bin. So your team's undisciplined. The guy that you have on there, that's a higher chance of getting a yellow card at some point in that match, right?
Yep.
But
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that I took away was, did I make a mistake drafting the guy with thighs and eyes and buys and tries? John Waiver.
The quadricep with eyeballs.
There we go. Did I make
done
a
it.
mistake? Should I have
Should've
let
took my
Vandy
guy.
take the guy?
Should've
Because the
took my
guy looked non-existent in that game. And I don't know what to make of it, honestly.
And then just wait till he tears off somebody's head and drinks the blood.
Yeah, there we go. Well, why don't
Well,
you have him on your team while that's going on? So let's make
Well,
a trade.
maybe you guys can cook up a little
Trade him.
trade because I know
Trade him.
Vandy really likes Ryberg, but Matt, I will say
Paddle
I
to him
don't
right now.
I have a feeling that this is not going to be the LA Giltinis moving forward. This might be a tiny bit of a wake up call.
Trade
But that
me
being said,
Ryberg.
that being said, 11.1 points for Jerry Labouchard, the winger for Houston. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Top 6 finish. He had that huge intercept.
Okay.
I think by the 40-meter line that just took it to the house. That was pretty cool. And that's something I
That was
learned too is
slick,
that
too.
there's still with the MLR, there's still a lot of rash decision making that leads to these types of interception, really big time scores. So that's something that people are going to have to factor in as well. Just some other guys that did well. Hanko Gramicius, 7.8 points. He was the best Giltinis player. Luke Burden came through with 4 points, but he didn't even get the full 4 because he
What about
wasn't even
Bjorn?
designated on the kicker. Bjorn is on. No, Bjorn is not on this one.
No, he's on Legion.
Basson? Yeah, he's on the Legion, not Bjorn Basson. Yeah,
He didn't say anything about him.
we didn't say anything out about him, but yeah, we can go back to that.
Nah,
and
I'm
see
playing with you.
how
I'm
we
playing
did
with you.
that. Yeah, I think that's it to be said. It's just surprising about how many
Yeah.
Giltinis players
Wild game,
were
too.
Giltinis players were drafted and just not pulling through for fantasy managers. And I don't know if guys have to start getting clicking, the oh crap button or not, but I don't think that's the case.
I don't think so.
but
They had 8 points in about 10 minutes of play. I think it was just implode.
Yeah, it's one of those games. So we'll see whether or not that happens next week. So let's quickly move on here for these next 2 games. NOLA Gold, New England Free Jacks. Nothing too crazy there. I thought a pretty close battle between those two teams. from a fantasy perspective, just looking at who performed here, we have Bowden Waka, one of the top players this week. He finished second.
I mean, that's what I wanted
points.
to talk about from this game. I mean,
yeah,
Bowden Waka, I think we talked about this in the preseason, lead up to the draft, but having a 10 that is able to attack the line and make plays on it by itself, and not just be getting try assists, but also be breaking the line and having the opportunity to score tries himself. I think he's somebody, him and Mike Dabalas, those are two guys that look like they're pretty key fly halves, I think, in our league.
Yeah, that's a huge point. I think that because you have different styles of fly half play. I mean, you have guys that are just distributors. You have guys, like you're saying, that really attack those lines and try to find those open spaces to really have that threat on offense. So Bowden Waka seems like one of those guys. Clearly 14.7 points, second on the week. He looks to be a great pickup by Victoria's Secret. And then you guys got some guys pulling through too. Not too many fantasy points coming out of this game. John Poland coming through on New England scrum half, 7.9 points. He scored a try. Nick Feeks, he's a free agent, 7.3 points. He's scoring a try as well. Back three for NOLA. He wasn't a name that was on people's radar. So, yeah, not too many fantasy points from that matchup, but yeah, Bowden Waka I think is the biggest telltale from that. And then the last matchup here, guys, Seattle Seawolves, Toronto Arrows matchup in Seattle. A little bit more of point scoring here than this New England and NOLA matchup.
Yeah, I mean, Ross Neal was a big one in that one with that big intercept try. I don't know if you guys saw it, but Will Kelly threw an absolute, a shocker.
Just a floater. It was just a floater.
Oh, I mean, I don't want to say anything too bad about it. I don't think he'll see this. I hope he does, but let's not throw those rugby league passes trying to get it halfway across the field. Let's maybe put some spin on that bad boy and put some air under it so that Ross Neal isn't picking it up and scoring, 60-meter tries.
It's just that rash decision making that I was talking about, and there is the talent in this league that will make players pay for making those dumb decisions. Yep. So tries like that, like Ross Neal when he takes I think it was 80 meters, I think, to the house.
It was 80 meters at least.
It was pretty big. So Ross Neal finishing third on the week, and that's what I'm telling you about tries, man. It didn't take much. Third on the week. All it took was one big time try, and he finishes there as one of the top players. So
I mean,
just something.
A perfect example of that is Mitch Richardson coming in with 6.4 points this week, and I mean last year this guy was non-existent. But he gets a try.
21st on the week too.
Yep, he dots one down, and suddenly he gets boosted up into top 25 point range. So like you said, try is king.
Yeah, so should be interesting. Those are the 6 matchups that had happened this week. It was the Rugby New York that was on bye this week. They'll play this coming week.
7
so
matchups.
Pretty exciting. Yeah, pretty exciting. Oh yes, 7 matchups, I believe. 6 matchups, Matt.
6 matchups.
Oh yeah,
I can't count. There's 13 teams. Matt can't count. Come on, let's go.
Count.
6 matchups, all pretty exciting. I think it was a really good opening week of rugby. And with that being said, here are my thoughts on that opening week of rugby. That is the wrong drop. I guess that is a draft pick. That was a little throw. We heard enough of that last week, but here we go. That's right. Halfway point through the show, it is time for Commissioner Yee's thoughts. Give you some update on how the league is looking right now, how the fantasy managers are doing. Keep everyone posted with how the official Fantasy Ruckers Rugby League is going. And with that being said, you guys were chirping about it in the beginning, but the official rankings and standings after week 1 have finally been released. Dankus Anchor is finishing up number 1, scoring a whopping 39.6 points this week. Even beat John, who put up 25 on his own. Pretty big. Tijuana Hookers, Ryan's team from San Diego. He's coming in second place, winning his week as well. Man, he was in a tight matchup against Malcolm of
Yeah.
Victorious Secret. I think it was just it was less than 2 points that decided their matchup after everything. So that was the closest matchup of the week. Vandy, you only scored 23 points, man, but you still came through with the big dub against Matt.
I don't
He
wanna
only
talk
had
about it.
9
Let's
points
move on.
again. And you actually end up in third. So as of right now, only $40 extra are going to charity because of your performance. So
Sorry,
take
charity.
that for as you will. Wes coming in at the 4th spot. He won as well. He had a little bit of an easy matchup. It didn't take much for him either. 17.1 points, 6 points against by Rugby Morning. That was a tough outing for Fitz of Rugby Morning. And then to round it out, like I said, Malcolm with Victoria's Secret in 5th, Lads on Tour, John in 6th. Matt with 9 points, buddy,
Hey,
coming
it's
in at
just-
7.
You know what? That's promising. It's my bye week. You know, my
You-
kicker was out. My World Cup winning All Black halfback was out. So I'll take it. I'll take the
Fair
L,
enough.
Vandy, and we'll move on.
Fair
There
enough.
you go.
Boot, you got to feel pretty good. Do you feel like this, Vandy, on that?
My balls are hot.
Are your balls hot?
My balls are hot.
How hot are your balls, Vandy? Are
My
they
balls are hot.
are they hot? I don't know. After that first week,
I don't
we'll
want
see.
to rub it in too much. I mean,
Okay, one more time.
my balls are
All
hot.
right.
My
Wow.
balls
Let's
are
get it
hot.
out of here. Let's
There we go. So that is the official standings. Those will be released, and you can check those out as well. And like I said, you can see the fantasy finish for all the players on our Discord channel. We have a document up there for all of our community members to have a look at how fantasy players did. And yeah, just my last thought here, guys. We touched on the broadcast issues and the sources and getting the stats. Hokey was kind enough to give me another resource of Tribe Stats. It's an app that I can use on my phone, and I was checking it out today as I was finishing up the fantasy results, and it was really, really helpful. So hopefully that can help us moving forward. And my final thought here, guys, is I'm just really having a blast of seeing how much fun you guys are having after this first week. It took a lot of work to kind of put this all together, and it just makes it that much more rewarding to see you two guys and also the 6 other league members really enjoying themselves. So thank you guys for all of your support through that. Now, with that being said, it's now time to move on to the waiver wire. And Vandy, you talked about this earlier in the show, how we are going to try to navigate this. And it's going to be interesting to see how players are going to operate, how managers are going to operate this whole situation, just so all of our league members know this is how it's going to work. The stats and everything have been revealed. They are now out. You can use all those resources to see what you can do, what players are available, what players are not. You can then submit your claims, and you're going to do that the same way you set your lineups. You're going to send me a direct message with the name of the player, the team name, the position, and the waiver, the fab bid, the fab amount that you want to put on that waiver claim. Those need to be into me by tonight. That is Wednesday night, and those will process Thursday morning ahead of Thursday's games.
It's Tuesday.
Tuesday night or Wednesday night?
Wednesday night, but this podcast comes out on Wednesday, so it is tonight.
I gotcha.
And it is tonight, and those have to come out there, and then they will be processed Thursday morning, and then you'll be able to set your lineups for the matchups of that day. Now, with that being said, let's talk about those free agents that are in our league that are available. There's a bunch of them, man, and I don't know how many people are going to pull the trigger because it's still really, really early in the season. I'm not sure if it's too early to kind of jump bait from some of those guys that you may have drafted earlier. But hey, sometimes those early decisions pay off, and some of these guys that are available now maybe they shouldn't be available, really, just based on all how they're implementing to the lineup. So obviously we got to talk about the biggest one here. Yeah, Quinn de la Vega Mendia, the boot for Rugby Atlanta, scoring 6 conversions, 3 penalties, fly half back, 3 eligibility. He can fit in both positions. That's pretty big. What are you guys thinking here? I think someone's going to drop a decent amount of fab on this, especially if there's a team that is fly half needy. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I'm pretty happy with my fly half right now. He seems to like Joe. As my designated kicker.
Yeah.
I
will say, Vandy, you don't need to give away any of your strategies, but just as like a general idea of how you saw. I know, Matt, you were mentioning about how you weren't really impressed with his play outside of his kicking, so maybe it's not worth the fab budget to drop in on him.
I mean, if
That's
you got
true.
a kicker, right? Like if you've already got a kicker that you trust, then at the end of the day, they scored a lot of tries. That's why he got all those kicking points. And again, try is king. Is he going to score a try every match? I don't know. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing. I personally won't be dropping too much foul. I mean, I don't think I'll be dropping anything on him, or I will. I mean, find out. Who knows? But
Yeah, I guess that those are the mind games that you can play on this podcast. Those are the
yep.
powers that you guys have because our league members are going to be listening, and we'll see whether or not they take the bait on that. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Like I said earlier in the show, to me at least from a fantasy perspective, there were guys that maybe not on the score sheet that really stood out, guys like Julian Dominguez, like you mentioned, Matt. But
Yep.
that being said, there was no one that really popped off the page when it came to fantasy performance that really took people over the top. Yes, Yaquin got 17.3 points, but it could have been more. I feel like on a week to week basis, there can be guys that score a lot more points than that. So I don't know. Maybe it feels like you need to drop the bank on this guy because he was the highest point scorer in this first week, and he obviously has a role in the Rugby Atlanta offense, especially when it comes to kicking.
Yep.
But I guess, like you said, Matt, it's only if you need those points in that area. Do you need a fly half? Do you need a kicker?
I
Maybe
mean,
he's
if
a guy
if your kicker's
take a
on
flyer
bye
on.
next week,
True.
maybe
True.
it's
New
time to
England.
pick him up.
Who's on bye next week?
New England is on bye this
New
coming
England's
week.
on bye.
So yep. So New England.
I'm good.
Coming into
What
And I
I will
think-
say though on
yeah.
waiver pickups though is, at least for forward wise, maybe center wise as well. But if you're watching the games, and I think if you see a guy getting the ball a lot, finding himself with the ball in hand a lot, I think that's somebody that you should drop. At least make a claim for. Because those are the guys that are going to have the most opportunity. You know, guys like Ben Mitchell, guys like I thought Doug Fraser got the ball a lot. I mean, he's already picked up, but Ben Mitchell was a guy that I really saw as somebody who was finding himself in positions to have the ball and constantly find himself, breaking gain line. And somehow he ended up, he would have the ball, get up and get another one again the next phase. So I think those are the guys you have to look for right now because we don't know anything about consistency yet.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just gonna say.
That's
Is
the
that
biggest-
I think these numbers are going to be a facade in some cases. Like I
Yeah.
feel like it's going to mask a lot of things. Like I think you can't just solely look at these numbers and be like, oh
Yeah.
crap, Jerry Lubashog on Houston got 11.1 points. Oh my gosh, I got to drop the bank on him this week. No, he only got one intercept try from the 50-meter line that made him get those points. How involved is he in the offense? How much is he touching the
Exactly.
ball? And I think that's going to be what you're saying, Matt, the big key. And I think that's what's going to differ here. I think in fantasy football, fantasy hockey, you can get away with just kind of seeing guys who put up points. You're like, okay, this is a good player. This is a guy. But I think in rugby, more so just because, at least as of right now, the amount of types of points that we're tallying up here is very minimal. It's just, try assists and things like that. That there's a lot more in the game than just that. So I think guys will have a bigger impact when it comes to its points total that you'll see. So I'm curious to see whether or not this week in the waiver wire claims, guys notice maybe guys that were involved in the offense but didn't score anything this week that maybe go through. So that'll be interesting. Like I said, Jerry Lebashog, he's coming in second as the best available free agent. He scored 11.1 points. Austin White, the third highest available free agent at 10.1 total points. Again, this list is on that document with the rankings after week 1. And then some other familiar names: Kyle Bredenbach, Ben Mitchell, Nick Feeks, like we said. This is all based on points, and like you guys mentioned, we don't know anything yet. We're still trying to create this baseline, so
And I
we
think
don't know. Yeah,
I was just gonna say I think that what I would advise, and I think the way that I'm gonna go, or maybe not the way that I'm gonna go, is it's week 1. You picked your guys, you did the research, you drafted your guys for a reason.
Yep.
Week 2, maybe this is where it tells you. Maybe week 2
Yeah.
is where you see, okay, are they testing out this lineup, or is this it? Is this a guy can do it 2 weeks in a row? And perfect segue, week 2 matchups. This is where we're going to find out who's who, what's what, and who you're going to keep and who you got to give away.
Yeah, I think there'll be a battle between guys that, because I noticed at least in our waiver pickups and stuff that were happening up until week 1, there were guys that were moving a lot of players because of the roster news that were coming out, and there's some guys that were a little bit more cautious and more comfortable with just playing the guys that they drafted. I'm curious to see in this upcoming waiver period how many guys transition that team, and do the guys that are maybe a little bit more ballsy
My balls are hot.
go in
Balls
there
are hot.
and maybe it pays off because they're able to pick up guys that, like I said, shouldn't be available. So that'll be interesting. Like I said, go through the stats, make your waiver wire claims. I mentioned on how you guys can do that. I will reiterate all that on the Discord channel. But yeah, just send me a message before Wednesday night with your player name, team name, position, and fab bid, and those will all process Thursday morning ahead of that day's matchup. Now that's being said, Matt, like you said, let's move on to those week 2 matchups, and we're just going to quickly breeze over all of these here. I don't think we need to really dive deep into each of them and talk about the players because, like we said, we really don't know. We don't know that the starting lineup that we saw this week is going to be anywhere close to the starting lineups that we saw last week, and knowing rugby and knowing the dynamic nature of it, it very well won't be. So it'll be interesting to see how managers kind of navigate through that. But we've got a lot of matchups. We've got Seawolves versus Warriors. Hey, Vandy, your boys taking on a Wolves team that came off a big win against Toronto. So we'll see whether or not you and your Warriors boys can redeem themselves and get back in the win column.
Yep.
Got Toronto Arrows versus the Giltinis, the Legion versus the Jackals, the Sabercats versus Rugby New York, who sees their first matchup of the week. And fun fact, it was Rugby Morning who drafted Andrew Coe. And like Vanny said, he regrets it, but we have to give the power to Rugby Morning to decide Coe's first career MLR try. So I'm going to shoot a
let's
message
get him fined. Let's get him fined.
I'm gonna shoot a message over to Fitz, see what he's thinking. We're gonna obviously vet it to make sure that it is okay. And with Andrew Coe's approval, we're hoping to see that this week. We'll see whether or not he makes the starting lineup. We're really pulling for him. He's the friend of the show. We're I would say one of his number 1 fans now that we've had him on. It was a fun interview. You can check that out in episode 2 of the show on YouTube and on everywhere you find podcasts. But that will be an interesting matchup. And then to round it out, Nola Gold take on Rugby Atlanta. AG, the Austin Gilgronis, take on Old Glory DC. And like we mentioned, the New England Free Jacks have the bye this week. Anything that you're looking out in particular, guys, in these week 2 matchups? Anything in general that you're just keeping an eye for?
Utah.
Just it's all Utah here on out, eh?
Yeah,
That's it.
I got a couple things. One,
Yeah.
Can Houston do it again against Rugby New Jersey? 2, Giltini's got an easy matchup against the Arrows, who are looking a little bit shaky. I think the Giltinis bring it back, and I think this is going to be a big game for Giltini players, for those owners who's got them.
Watch them lose.
And Legion's the team. Like I said, Dallas Jackals. I think they're the team that's gonna have a rough start to their year, and San Diego Legion may be the team to put up some points on them. So look for those players to do well as well.
I think Vandy's like a low-key San Diego Legion.
He loves them.
You know what it did?
You hate him, but you love
You
him.
know what it did it for me was the draft. The draft, when every time I picked a Legion guy, I got shit on for it. And you know what? It just was that much sweeter when they did well.
Hey,
You know,
just when
I
you
gotta
start
say,
to
it.
love them, they're gonna start, giving you big donuts. You're gonna be in the
That's fine.
negatives.
As a chubby guy, I love donuts.
There we go.
You don't want them.
So yeah, that is an interesting point. I think tough go, just looking at these matchups initially, tough go for the Toronto Arrows. I mean,
Yeah.
you're facing a you just come off a tough loss against the Seawolves, and then now you got to take on a pissed off Giltini's team that just
Yeah,
lost
the
to
champs.
the losers of last season.
But
Yeah.
this game's in Victoria, BC. Langford,
True.
BC.
Is it the first match that's in BC? I think it's the
They're
first match
training up there, so it looks like they're
Interesting.
playing up there this week. So maybe look for the Arrows to have a bit of a blinder here and have a bit of a game. So
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, how can you really say anything? I mean, after the Giltinis got upset last week, I mean, who's to say that anyone can't get beat any week? So
there we go.
I think we'll be in for a treat in round 2 of the MLR. Lots of fun matchups, and remember, it starts Thursday this week.
Yeah.
So we
And
got
the game
literally.
Friday.
And the game Friday. So we literally, I mean, I guess that's one thing that's good about rugby is that we literally get it. Once the later tail end of the week comes, we get rugby all all day, every day, to close out the week. Like I said, gonna be a fun round 2. Well, just as we close out the show here, guys, I mean, I feel like just so much information throughout the whole thing with this being our first week. Still a lot of things to iron out here in terms of how the fantasy league operates, in terms of you guys figuring out the strategies and stuff. But Vandy, I think the biggest theme here was just your reaction to the number, your very first week of rugby. Can we say that your rugby virginity has been taken? Is that how we're gonna say it now?
Weird take, sure.
Yeah, weird
sure.
take. Well, that's what we'll call it. But with that
Weird
being
flex,
said,
but yeah.
that's what we'll take it. Vandy, why don't you give us a little note here about your thoughts in week 1?
Well, I mean, as far as the games go, they were great. Utah, you know what? We did great. We looked good. We, we showed resilience the way we came back when it kind of looked over. The penalties, man, the damn penalties. And that's the shoot yourself in the foot kind of moment. And you know what? There's nothing more frustrating when you beat yourself. That was a winnable game. We should have won it. We move on. We beat the Seawolves next week. And I mean, hey, forgive and forget. Forgive and forget.
There we go. I feel like that hot mic is just gonna turn into Vandy's Utah Warriors rant. But
when
it's
I
okay.
That's what it
start
is.
declining, next week when I end up 1-1 and I go like, I don't know, 1-4, these hot mics are gonna be rage.
Yep.
There we go. And I cannot look more forward to that because I've seen your rage feuds when it comes to other fantasy sports. If it's anything even half of that, everyone listening to this podcast is gonna be in for a treat going forward. But that just about does it, guys. I mean, an exciting week 1, even more excited for week 2.
I got something to say about week 2.
Okay.
All right.
Let's hear it.
MLR, Rugby Network, everyone else involved.
Fix your camera.
Just take a look at me. Commentators, let's do a little better. Broadcasters, let's do a little better. I can't do what you do, but let's do a little better. And hey, the guys putting up the graphics on the screen, figure it out. All right? Figure it out. All right,
there we go. I feel like that's what it's all about, right? This MLR whole project is just everyone just needs to get a little bit better every week when it comes
Just
to
get a
football,
grip.
when it comes
Get
to
a
fantasy
grip.
managers, when it comes to
Grow
the
up.
players, when it comes to media people. Everyone just got to be
MLR, grow up.
a little bit better. But there we go. As we close it out, guys, any particular things that you're excited for in week 2?
Yeah, MLR,
watching
we still
Co
love
hit the
you.
field.
Please sponsor us and help us with stats.
There we go. Subtle plug by Matt. I love that, Vandy. Yeah, we are very much looking forward to Andrew Coe taking the field, and hopefully he maybe gets into that starting lineup, and maybe we'll see a fun try celebration too come this week. But that will do it for us here on the Fantasy Rucker Show. For Vandy, for Matt, I am Ryan Yee. Thank you for tuning in. An exciting week 2. Make sure you tune in next Wednesday for a recap of week 3. Or excuse me, a recap of week 2 and a look ahead to week 3.
I'm
Thanks,
getting
guys,
a
for
dub
tuning
this
in.
week, boys.
We'll be back.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.